Alright, so I'm actually back in the garage. It's been just a rough week or two in my personal life, and I really need to get kind of crunching down on this whole project. So I don't think anyone's exactly following along and counting on me showing them how to do this, but I'm gonna continue to make, these E7 porting videos as I go, and then, once I'm done with the one head, it's very tempting to go from doing the steps that I've done on this head and then jump over to that one. I think in one of the original videos I mentioned why that's not a bad idea because of your muscle memory and getting back in touch with what you're working on. But at the same time, I guess I could always save one chamber or cylinder basically to show step by step. Like, I probably want to do an actual real-time cutting job. Not that you're going to sit there and watch it, but it'll give you a better idea and realistic idea of how to use it. But I figured I would chime in today because my short side and floor cuts are basically 100% done and basically blended, as I was just miking them out and putting the finishing touches on them. From the port side, that's basically all I can do. They're basically finished. I may double check from the bowl side and just make sure it's completely blended in, which I think it is. If anything, I just have to put the finishing touch on. So what we ended up with, actually that's inaccurate now, is overall I've ended at about I'd say they're all about a 333, so I stayed, again, conservatively under 340, which is the GT40 spec of the apex of the short side. So now we're looking at the window, which is this section from the port, and it's not focusing. But if you didn't pay attention or see the last video, basically, if you want, what really helps take an E7 with the factory-sized intake valves that are 1.76 inch, where you'll really start to break 200 CFM and exceed a factory GT40, is cutting down, starting to clone the short side radius and the floor, which you can see here. So we're looking at the floor. So these are actually upright. And something I failed to mention is when you're doing these cuts from the port, it's definitely a lot easier to see if you're doing it with the right side up. So having the roof as the roof, basically. But with a light under there, it's a lot easier to see. The thing is, there's so many orientations you can put heads in. You could stand them vertically like this and get a better angle. And I say, like, try all angles and look at all of your cuts, even if they're mic'd out, like, you may notice something. But yeah, where I last left off is that was the key that I gave, was basically your kind of cloning the, I wish I could light all of these up so you could see, but even as a visual pass, they're all pretty much... There we go, now the light is helping. But yeah, you're basically cloning the floor and the short side to the spec of a GT40. So an E7 is about an inch, like 1.225. If you take, a T-gauge and you get to the apex and then back to the floor a little bit. And you're really just bringing the floor down in succession with it, so it still gets opened up. But obviously the tunnel itself starts to open up again, so this just happens to be a pinch area, just similar to the bulge of the push rod right here. So from a 1.225 at that pinch now to a 1.330 plus. But what I've seen in flowbench testing is that particular modification is really what brings this up to, I think he hit like 212 CFM with a stock valve. A lot of times you'll see people possibly not thinking to do that or doing that particular modification to clone or think to clone it, and they're getting different results or even under 212. Obviously your lower lift numbers are important too, and as I've discussed, this particular build is in a truck, so maintaining velocity was the main objective. It's an engine that won't really see above 5,500 RPM, so keeping velocity under that level and certain lift levels is important. The other thing to consider on that short side is obviously the water jacket is staying within that 340 is you're not really in danger and there's enough integrity of that. However, the same person I did see who flow benched this kind of technique also took it further. And basically this absolutely makes sense in airflow dynamics and theory. He started to see an increase in his higher lift numbers, whereas the lower lift values started to go down. So that's why it's a good rule of thumb for velocity and that water jacket is just stick to that value. 1.330. You can go to 1.340. Like it just becomes more difficult to be precise. Then you're miking out toward the short turn, your center, like before the valve guide, and then on the inside. However, one thing I will note that I did is you can see how there's a little curvature at the floor toward the window. There we go, finally a decent shot. I have it set, and it's a very minuscule difference, but I have it set up so, of course I probably just released the set screw, but toward the short turn I did leave a little more open, so it drags a little bit more on this side than toward the short turn, just because that's where most of the airflow is. And here's a nice shot of seeing how I did a bias cut toward the roof for the pushrod bulge. And you could blend that out and make it more. I just made these kind of little pockets, and it ends up being about 50%. But if you can see in the camera how, if we're at a certain distance, how it's obviously that can change, but at about an equal view, that it's basically you're looking at the valve guide there. And again, now that's a nice straight shot of air without losing any velocity here. That it's possibly, debatable is I look at this as like E7s are virtually free. I want to toy with more velocity. If you want to flatten that whole thing out, go ahead. Like it's going to flow more air, but it may also hurt velocity. So if you're looking for torque, maybe do it this way. But that's the fun of this, and it's like a science Olympiad where this is my theory, it's an experiment, why not do it? It doesn't cost you anything. But overall, I would definitely still do one or the other. I wouldn't leave that bulge there. Okay, so that's about it on the short side. I think you get the gist of it. And again, I am going to actually do a full demo, I think, on the next head. But the other thing to note is the finish surface. Hold on, I really got to focus in on that. It's annoying. It was there for about a second. There you go. Okay. You see how that looks like rippled or dimpled, kind of a rough surface? That is ideal, and there's probably different techniques, or even smaller, but it creates those little dimples or scallops, which is obviously better for overall turbulent flow. I'm not going to go into talking about dimples, but that is an ideal turbulent flow. especially, remember your intake is air and fuel, so any assistance with atomizing the fuel further is helpful. But how you do that is kind of funny and interesting. Is you don't need to finish your ports on the intake. Like if you want to sand roll the exhaust or polish certain spots for carbon, I guess, I think also in the chamber that helps with limiting detonation. But all you're gonna do is when this, I can just turn this on and show you, is you're basically just gonna let the burr, you're not going to apply any pressure at all on this. I'll show you. So you want it to basically, once you know that your cuts are done, that's how you attain that finish with just the regular double cut burr. So as long as you're using a double cut, which is kind of like what every porter uses, as I've seen like the single cut use, like maybe if you have to remove a lot of material. But that is, again, like there may be an even better technique, but that's the best way that I can describe what you're doing to create that rough, not too rough and not too dimpled, because the thing I've noticed with dimpling is, let's say, of course I only have a 1/4 inch, I don't have an 1/8 inch, but usually your dimples are going to be like using an 1/8 inch burr. The problem with doing that is if you're fully dimpling something, is eventually you are just taking out that much material, and you're changing the air velocity as far as the mass of air that can actually fill the volume. So, I mean, I'm sure that, you know, someone more experienced or doing a business could be like, oh, you've got to do it this way or that, but that's the way that I've kind of self-taught myself how that finish is done when you wonder how they did that. It's not a special burr. It's all in your technique. It's still cutting material. So again, like once you're on your final cut and everything is like mic'd out, then you're going to just kind of dance the burr. You can do that in the bowl and stuff, but that is the ideal finish for the intake, is little tiny scallops. Just a little increase in turbulence and velocity. So that's a little tip if you were curious on how to do that. Obviously it's a lot easier to do within a tunnel than it would be in the bowl. Like obviously be careful letting it dance around like that. Like you're not totally letting it go free. I mean, I'm not afraid to do it. It's not going to hurt anything to do it here, but yeah, it's like a controlled, just don't apply any pressure, just kind of with the weight of the burr. I'm trying to see if I can show a fresh example. It's harder to tell, but where I just cut it, you see how that's not a smooth finish, so that's all you're doing. So what is next on this particular one? Well, I've still got to open up the inboard. And just then from there, like cleaning this out. I still haven't totally opened up the bowls either. But as far as like the two significant changes, or three, is the floor, the short side, and then the short turn up there, and then you're still going to open up that guide, and then obviously the push rod bulge. So like I said, I just wanted to give like a little more info and chime in on, you know, your finishing surface before going to the next thing. And I'll keep doing a few more of these and then get to the exhaust, and then I'll attempt a real-time demo with each step on the next head. And again, I'll probably just do like one chamber. I'm not gonna videotape like 10 hours or something of the whole head. But alright, that's all. Just gonna try to... Yeah, there's no good way to light these. The closing shot. But yeah, they look pretty good to me, so those are done outside of cleaning some of that gunk out of there. So